Hey guys, what's going on? So today I have an album review for Heinous Killings with Hung with BARBWIRE. So if you're not familiar with Heinous Killings, they were a one-man brutal death metal band from the mid-2000s. Done by Joe Wolf, previously of Clean Flesh / Erotic Incisions, which was his old band back from the 90s. I believe he's also had some hardcore projects. And this is the last full-length album that he's put out through anything. I don't know if he's made any music since. But in my opinion, this is one of the best and most unique brutal death metal albums of all time. Some of the best vocals in all of brutal death metal, and honestly a completely essential album. So let me start off by showing some of the CD. This was put out through Unmatched Brutality Records in, I want to say, 2005. And it's a pretty hard CD to get. I think I paid a good bit for this one. And I'm happy to own it. This is definitely one of my favorite CDs I own. But cool album cover. Slightly, sorry about that glare, a little bit of a dated art style. Her face is kind of blurry, but pretty self-explanatory. It's got a chick hung with barbed wire, so yeah. There's the back with the track listing. There was a hole punch to this one, I got it. It's weird. There's the disc. You got that HK, obviously short for Heinous Killings emblem right there. Credits and stuff. And picture of Joe Wolf, the man behind the project. I love this little old school merch advertisement. A lot of the Unmatched Brutality CDs have this in the back. It's funny. So anyways, if you've never heard this album before, I'd say Heinous Killings, the style, is comparable to early Devourment in the sense of strong, not so much in sound, but in the sense of song structure, where there's that pattern of groove to a lot of grooves and chugs and slams. This wasn't really a slammy sort of release, but there's a lot of grooves and beatdowns. And then in between those, there's these really fast, blasty, sort of grindy parts in between each groove or slam or whatever that kind of fill the space and makes for a lot of build-up. So that's something that Heinous Killings does very well. Now, the biggest thing with Heinous Killings is Joe Wolf's vocals. I'm pretty sure they're Inhale. From what I've read, they are. But he's most well known for this vocal thing he does called Predators. And basically what that is it's a style of inhales, although I know some other people do it exhale. There's some other bands that have done it since, but I know Joe Wolf was the one who originated it. It's a very unique style of vocals. And it has this really gargly, just nasty, inhuman, really alien sort of sound to it, which it sounds like the Predator. Of course, that's why they're known as Predators. But I don't know. I can't think of anyone else with vocals who really sound like them the way that he does Predators. There's other bands that have done it since, but theirs are more exhale-y sounding. His vocals, for that, almost sound pitch shifted, but they're not. When you first listen to this, if you don't know about the Predator vocals and the notoriety that they have, you'd assume that they'd be pitch shifted vocals. They do have that really distorted sort of wet sound to them, but they're all natural, which is insane. The vocals might be cupped on the mic. I'm not sure if they are or not, because they do have somewhat a muffled kind of sound to them. But some of the most insane vocals you'll ever hear in brutal death metal. There's a lot of variety within his vocals. He does those Predators. He kind of saves those for the best parts, though. He doesn't do that for all the album. He also has these kind of inhale-y sounding lows that he does a lot. Over a lot of the faster parts, he does these high-pitched, I guess you would call them pig squeals, but they're not quite like Waking the Cadaver, they're not like that, but they have this really screechy sort of sound to them. And, there's some parts where he also does some other lows that are a little bit less human sounding, slightly lower than the regular inhale lows, and then of course the lowest vocals he does on here are the Predators. But anyways, this opens up with Possessed to Kill, which is one of the best songs on the album. There's not a single bad song on this, by the way. All 10 tracks are phenomenal. But Possessed to Kill opens up with the sample. There's a few samples on here. The only samples on here are on Possessed to Kill and I believe Infection Consumed. But it opens up with a sample about it's like a news report of some guy who killed his family, and then it closes with it sounds like somebody in court defending the guy who killed his family. Anyways, it's a neat little sample, but there's gunshots in the middle of the sample over some ambient sort of sound in the beginning, and it always jump scares me whenever I listen to this. It's funny. But anyways, a lot of the grooves on here have a little bit a beat down, very hardcore, which makes sense because I know that Joe Wolf was associated with or he was also part of like the hardcore scene prior to Heinous Killings and after Erotic Incisions or what's the band called, or Queen Flesh, whatever you want to call his first band. But you can definitely see the hardcore influence in here in a lot of the riffs, especially in songs like Hung with Barbed Wire or Skinned Alive in Acid. I mean, there's riffs in there that borderline sound like, I don't want to say they sound like nu metal, but if you like, I don't want to say they sound like nu metal riffs, but if you like put like some like really like screamy kind of vocals over them, it probably would. But they have that hardcore, like very groovy, like a low end, heavy low end sort of sound to them. Just really like chuggy. The guitars on here are definitely in a drop tuning because whenever he holds an open chord, it sounds like drop tuning. Yeah, I'd say the strongest songs on here are Possessed to Kill, Skinned Alive in Acid, Hung with Barbed Wire, Asphyxiating Soil, and probably Nailed Cranium. Those are all my favorites. Nailed Cranium has a really cool thing in the beginning that's like, it's not like a sample, but it's just like a sound effect of his vocals of like the Predators, but it's like made really loud to almost like ear rape sort of levels. And it just sounds really fucking scary and animalistic. Yeah, and No Cranium is also one of the like darker sounding songs on here. In general, I'd say this is probably one of the darkest brutal death metal albums ever, like up there with Mortal Decay's Forensic and stuff like that. And there's two reasons why. One is because some of the background information around the sound, which I don't think most of the general public knows about, or knows everything about. There's like a little bit that I've kind of scrounged up from reading interviews online lying around, and it seems like around the time that this album was made, yeah, or around the time he decided to form Heinous Killings, he had some health issues and he was dealing with a divorce. I believe he was also homeless, and you can definitely tell that he put a lot of emotion with that into this album. I'm not saying any of the lyrics, which, speaking of lyrics, there's none available anywhere in the booklet or online. All you have is the song titles to judge what each song's about. But as far as just the general aggression in the music, it seems like he's put a lot more in there than your average brutal death metal does. Because this album is, while it is extremely brutal and aggressive, like a lot of other brutal death metal albums, it has this really dark, almost nihilistic sort of feel to it that really adds to the atmosphere of this album, especially in a lot of the slower chugs and just like a lot of the just like abrasiveness of this album. It's just so heavy and grating on you because there's this dark atmosphere with this really just pummeling music, and this album just really makes you feel kind of worn down as you listen to all 10 tracks. And overall, I think that this is one of the most like hateful sounding brutal death metal albums. It's not like, there are bands that are heavier than this, but this is some of the heaviest, most nasty brutal death metal out there. But something about this album just has this dark sort of feel to it that not a lot of other brutal death metal does, and that's something that makes this album stand out to me. Anyways, first of all, so like I said, some of the like personal sort of background, like the personal sort of background that Joe Wolf had around the time he made this, kind of makes you think about more about the tone of the album, and then also just the way the songs sound in general. I mean, the riffs are very dense. There's no melody. Like they all have this really like, all the riffs have this very just cutthroat, just dark, straightforward sort of sound to them. There's not a ton of variety between songs, but each song seems to introduce some sort of new idea or groove to the table, despite the fact that they all meld together very well in a similar style. Like, Possessed to Kill introduces like the really grindy shit, and then Strangled by Intestines starts to show some of the slower parts where he really starts making the Predators pop, which I noticed the Predators sound the best around like the really slow, like nasty, not doomy, but like hardcore kind of like slow, and like the way like a slow chuggy hardcore riff sounds. That's when his Predator vocals sound best, especially like in Strangled by Intestines when he adds like double bass underneath the Predators. It just sounds ridiculous. There are programmed drums on this, and that is a big thing that might turn a lot of people off with this album, aside from how crazy the vocals are. The drums kind of sound like a typewriter. Now, if you're already like a big brutal death metal fan, like that's nothing new. I mean, brutal death metal in general, a lot of bands have really clicky drums. But if you're not a fan of brutal death metal, you probably won't like this at all, because this has really typewritery programmed drums, which I really like. It doesn't have the punchiest, thickest production ever. It's a little more on the thin side, but it has this very mechanical sort of sound to it that I do really enjoy. The guitar tone is pretty thick sounding. The bass is pretty much inaudible besides a few parts. I think it's either in Skinned Alive with Acid or Strangled by Intestines. There's one part where you could hear like a bass note, but other than that, it's also pretty inaudible for most of the album. But anyways, Asphyxiating Soil is probably one of the darker sounding songs I hear as well. His like pig squealy, kind of screechy vocals really sound just kind of dramatic around the beginning of the song in a weird way. I don't know how to explain it, but that's just how it sounds to me. That's another one of the stronger songs on here. I'm not sure what else I could really say about this album. This is an album that you really need to listen to experience. It just makes you feel kind of worn down in like a desperate sort of way. It's very dark, it's very violent and just nasty sounding. In both a literal sense of how the music sounds, it's very ugly sounding. But this album just has this really dark, like, not emotional, but just worn down, empty sort of feel that is very unique for brutal death metal. And I can't think of any real criticisms of this album. I mean, the production is a little on the thinner side, sure, but that's not really a bad thing at all. Every song on here is fantastic. There's just some great riffs, stellar fucking vocals, and also the drum programming, another thing, there's some great drum fills, really creative with a lot of the like cymbal patterns. It's really satisfying to listen to. Overall, a real masterpiece of brutal death metal. It's a shame he never did any other full lengths with Heinous Killings. There is also a split with Necrotic Disgorgement, which I believe he did live performances with Necrotic Disgorgement as the backing band, so that makes sense. That split's also really fucking good. I highly recommend that as well as this. I'd say the split actually has the best Heinous Killings song, Being Heard of Deformity. That's an amazing song, so go listen to that song as well as this album. But anyways, overall, I think this is honestly a perfect 10. I don't like giving perfect 10s to albums because I do like to be fairly critical of even albums that I absolutely love. But there is genuinely nothing bad I have to say about this album. It's a real masterpiece. So yeah, Heinous Killings with Hung with Barbed Wire. One of the greatest albums in brutal death metal and one of the most extreme albums in music in general. Not much else I could say, but please go listen to this if you have not. So that's it for this review. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.